I'm Kathy Kellenberger, and today I'd like to talk about SQL Server Integration Services deployment using the new project model. I am a senior consultant with PragmaticWorks. You can find me occasionally on Twitter at Aunt Kathy, and I have a new blog site, AuntKathySQL.com, and I'll post the slides and answer any questions on that site. The thing about SSIS, well, really starting way back, whenever DTS went away and SSIS was introduced, a lot of people were pretty scared and not really sure how to start, and there was a pretty steep learning curve going from that technology to SSIS. So finally, folks are finally starting to get used to SSIS, and then we had a big change in 2012. I had another session a few months ago talking about all these changes, and what I realized was that there is so much around deployment, and that is really the biggest area, so that's why I decided to have a session just on the deployment using this new project model. And I want to make sure everybody knows that it's not difficult at all to learn. It's very easy compared to making that switch from DTS to SSIS. So making this little incremental switch is pretty easy. Another thing I want you to keep in mind as I go through these, you're going to have to spend some time figuring out your approach, how you're going to use this technology, figure out an approach and stick with it. Try not to do some things one way, other things another way, and you'll see what I mean in just a minute. So what I would like to do is just kind of compare the old package deployment model, which is actually still available. You can still do things the old way if you would like, compared to the new project model. So as far as availability, the old model is available in any version of SSIS, and this new project model is just available in 2012 and 2014 that just came out a couple days ago, in fact. The unit of work in the package model is the package, and of course in the project model it's a project. That doesn't mean you have to run all the packages in the project at the same time. It just means when you deploy them and manage them, you're going to be working at the project level. The old way, you had a ton of different choices on how to implement it. You could just have them deployed to a share. You could have them installed in the MSDB database. They could be part of an SSIS package store. The new model, you could still deploy those old ways if you wanted. It's still available, but the new way is with the SSIS catalog. The old way, you had lots and lots of choices as far as configuration. Do I want to do configuration in files? Do I want to do configuration in tables, SQL tables? Do I want to include environment variables? With the new model, we use parameters and environments, and you'll see what I'm talking about when I get to the demos. How do I configure security? The old way, if you had those configuration files in files, configurations in files, those were not encrypted, and they may have some sensitive information like connection strings and passwords. With the new project model, there's security built in. You could execute packages in the past using DTExec or DTExec UI. Project, you now have a new version of DTExec, and you can run it from the catalog, and you can also run them from T-SQL. So in the past, if you wanted to run a package from a stored procedure, you know, that was kind of difficult to do without something like a command shell. Now there are actual T-SQL commands. Logging, previously you had to decide what you wanted to log and you had to go and set that up. Now you get logging by default. Reporting, you had to figure out your own reporting based on the logging, and now that reporting is built in. So it's kind of like getting getting one of the what am I trying to say, frameworks that somebody like Jamie Thompson or Jessica Moss, somebody like that, had developed. So now it's just built in. So let's first talk about parameters and variables. What is a parameter? You'll hear me talk about parameters throughout today's session. So I kind of like to think of parameters as a special type of variable. Inside my package, I can have variables that I can change the value of. I can use in many different ways, expressions, scripts, properties, all kinds of ways I can use variables. A parameter, the scope is slightly different. Inside my package, I can see the parameter, but I cannot change the value of it. So inside my package, my parameter is available to me, but it's read-only. So I can use it on the right hand of an expression. I can take that parameter and use it in an expression, use it in a script. I just can't change the value of it. There's also parameters at the package level and parameters at the project level. So let's go ahead and take a look at what I'm talking about here. And I have a project already put together. Ended up on the wrong monitor. Let me bring it over. And this is a very, very, let's see, let me find the right package that I'm interested in, this child package. This package is very, very simple. Basically, all I'm doing is running a T-SQL command that is going to insert a value in a table. And I'm using a variable called SQL command to I build that command in my package. So let's take a look at the variables down here. And my SQL command variable, everything's going to the wrong monitor today. Let's see if I've got, yeah, I've got an insert statement that sends the package name and along with a message stored in this str message variable. Okay, so that's what the SQL command variable has in it and what this will run. I also have a message variable that's used in that SQL command, and by default it just says hello world by default. So if I run this task by itself, and it ran successfully, and then I jump over to SQL Server and I have a database set up, and it says that right now, and I'm in Central Time, that's why it's 10, the child package sent a message, hello world. Okay, so I also have an expression task, and this is new in 2012, and what I'm doing here is I am saying change my message to this package parameter. And let me show you the package parameter. I have this new tab, and there's my parameter. So you set it up kind of like a variable, and the value says hello from parameters. So if I use that value, then my little command will be different, and my insert will be slightly different. So I'm going to just run this so that everything works. And that ran successfully. Now I'm going to go back to SQL Server and run this again. And so now I can see that my command got the value from the parameter. So as I mentioned, I can use the parameter to change the value of my variable, but I can't go the other way. That parameter is read-only inside my package. If I had, for example, if I had a script task, I'm not allowed to add that parameter to the script task as a read-write, only as a read. I also have a master package that calls my child package, and I've said this is the package I want to run, and I also have this tab called parameter bindings. So if I have something inside my child package, I have a child package parameter, how do I bind that? So my child package parameter was this param message, and so I need either a variable or a parameter from the master package to send the value in. And that's something that you might do. You might decide, if you've got a lot of master child packages set up right now, you can do this now with parameters. You may decide to go ahead and continue that model, or maybe you might decide, you know what, we're going to forget the master package and just run each child package with parameters. So if I execute this task, it will call my child package. I'll go back to my SQL statement, and you can see that this time the child received the value from the master package. Let me also show you that I have a special project parameters that I can see at the project level, and I can also create parameters at this level. Okay, so I can create them at the project level and create them at the package level. So you may be wondering, what would be better to do? What would be the best way to do it? I suggest that if it's a parameter that you're going to need for multiple packages, go ahead and set it at the project level. If it's something that a package needs that no other package is going to need, probably set that at the package level instead. So again, it's scoping. Let me go back, and the next thing I want to show you is a really interesting thing that I just discovered recently. I was kind of surprised when I saw it, so I hadn't really heard many people talking about it. And you can, with your parameters, set up different values depending on different environments that you are working with. So here I have this parameter value for this particular package with a value of 1, and by default I get a development environment to work in. If I pull up this configuration manager, I can, let's see if I can remember, sometimes I forget how to do this. Here we go. I can create another environment. So I'll just call this one testing. And I can copy the settings from development if I want. So I'll go ahead and do that. And close that. So now what I see up here is that I have a development configuration and a testing configuration. This is useful if you have multiple people working on the same project, or you want to test different sets of settings. You can switch back and forth. So what I can do then is I can add parameters to these different configurations. So if I click this button here and click Add, I can grab this parameter and I can set different values for the different environments. So for testing I could set it to a 2, and for development I could set it to a 1. And I'll click OK, and it tells me make sure you save, and I found that it does works really well if I save. If I don't, then I can't see the difference. So notice that this is a 2 now. If I switch back to development, then it'll switch to a 1. So I could have all of my parameters, server names, that type of thing, and set up multiple different environments for my project. Let me go back to this has got a script task, and I just wanted to show you, remember we've got our package parameter here. If I look at the read-write variables, you'll see nothing came up. The read-only variables, you can see that I've got my parameters. So this is just to let you know that there's no way that this is going to let you inside the package change this parameter value. Another interesting thing that you can do, and let me go to a different package here, this export package. Here's a package with the data flow that has a couple of connection managers. So obviously connection strings and connection string properties are the types of things that we are most likely to need to configure at runtime, right? Those type of things. So I've got a couple of connection managers set up here. This is pretty cool. I can just right-click and select parameterize. Let me say it right. Parameterize, and choose, whatever it is, maybe server name or whatever. I can use existing parameters or create a new one, decide what scope I want it to be, that type of thing, and click OK. So now you'll notice, right as soon as I did that, that little icon changed to show me that this is configured with an expression. So what it did was it created a new parameter. I think it was at the package, at the project level, right? So it created a new parameter for me, and it also modified my connection string so that it is now based on an expression instead of hard-coded. So that's another interesting thing that you can do. I think I have covered everything I want to about parameters, how to work with them, how to set them up, the scoping, passing values in, that type of thing. So let's go back to the slides, and maybe I can get these slides to work the way I want to. Maybe if let's see, I guess I can't. I hate that I'm in the middle of a presentation and it doesn't work the way I want it to, but I guess I'll have to stay with that. The next thing to learn about is the SSIS catalog. So the SSIS catalog is a database. It's a built-in framework, really, that you have to set up, and inside that SSIS catalog you will have all the information about the packages that are deployed, information about configuration, permissions, encryption, and some of the sensitive items are encrypted, everything that you need, all set up. So you can see that there is a brand new section called Integration Services Catalogs, and underneath that you'll see SSIS DB. Notice it says catalogs, plural. I haven't checked with 2014, but at least in 2012 I can only create one of these. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how to do this. So here's my that section, Integration Services Catalog. So what I have to do, it's pretty simple to set up. I right-click. Oops, let me refresh this first because I deleted my catalog right before the session. Right-click, create catalog, and of course everything goes in the wrong side, and you'll have to enable CLR integration if it's not already enabled. I don't believe you can change the name of the database, it's just there, and you have to set up a password. Okay, when I do this, this is going to set up everything I need as far as encryption keys. There's my SSIS DB catalog, but I also am going to see that right here. So I also have an actual database, SSIS DB, that is the catalog. So I see it in both places. This acts like a regular database that I'll be able to query and take a look at, but down here, this is where I will work with my packages. So the really nice thing about this is that I will be able to take a look at the tables, reverse engineer things if I want, set up my own reports, things like that. There's also a number of views that help you take a look at this information. So I'm not going to spend time drilling through these tables, but just want you to know that these are available. You can look at them. Okay, the next thing we are going to talk about is deployment. There's a new way to deploy called this ISPAC. We can run that either with a wizard or from command line. That ISPAC file has everything in it that you need to deploy the project. So what you could do is hand that file off to the database administrator that's responsible for deploying the projects. We can also deploy from T-SQL. There's some new T-SQL commands. There's an API as well. I did not really take the time to dig into that, but you can use that API to write a C# program for deployment, or use it with PowerShell. These are the two easiest ways that I found to deploy the projects. So let's go back and take a look at how we would do this. So one thing I want to, a couple of things I want to take a look at before we deploy. There is a property of the packages called entry point package. By default, that's checked for every item, but what I'm going to do is uncheck it for some of our packages. For example, this child package, I'll uncheck it. Let me uncheck it for this one as well. Basically, it just sets these packages at a different level as far as viewing the parameters. So if I had a master package with a bunch of child packages, I would probably want to go ahead and turn that value off for all those child packages, just to make things simpler to work with once they're deployed. Another thing I want to show you is that if I right-click, I could, if I want to, convert to the package deployment model. So by default, when I create a 2012 SSIS project, it will be the project deployment model by default. As long as I have not used parameters, I can convert back to this older model. So it's still available for you. So I'm going to leave it the way it is, and I'm also going to right-click and deploy. When I do that, a wizard pops up. I'm going to click through this, and basically just asked me a couple questions. First of all, what is the server name that where I want to deploy? In my case, it's localhost, and it also asks for a path. Well, it's remembering this path from when I practiced my demos earlier, but you can see because I got rid of my catalog, it doesn't exist anymore. So what I'm going to do is just click Browse, and I have to create my create my folder. It's got to be in place. Make sure it's selected and click OK. That's really the only information I need to provide. I'll click Next, make sure everything looks OK, and deploy. And after a few seconds, I can go back to my SQL Server, refresh, and now I can see that Training on the T's folder that I created, and under Projects, I can see my project and all of my packages. If I wanted to, I could instead of going through that wizard, I could, from Visual Studio, I could, let me go ahead and go to Visual Studio, Projects, Training on the T's. I could go ahead and copy this Training on the T's ISPAC file and send it to my DBA. Actually, I have copied it to another folder. So here's another folder where I earlier copied it out, and I can double click on this and that same wizard will pop up. In this case, it's telling me, this is where my file is located. I can click Next and again provide the server name, choose a folder, click Next, and deploy. So in that case, it just overwrote what I had done. Another thing that I can do, and this is really handy if you have many packages to deploy, is to use a command line. So what I can do is if I have this wizard, if I get to the very end, I can grab this command line it's not the whole command line, but it's the parameters that I'm going to need for deploying it. So I'm going to cancel out of that and go over to my code. So here's one that I have all ready to go. The issue is that this path has to be, test from command line, has to be already in place. So let me come over here and add that. And I'm going to copy that just to make sure I have it exactly right and paste it in here. And I'm going to grab this command. So it's isdeploymentwizard.exe, and the rest of the information I could get out of the wizard. And we'll go ahead and paste this in and hit enter and cross our fingers and come back, refresh, and there's our packages deployed. This one actually doesn't have as many, that copy I made yesterday, it doesn't have as many packages, it looks like. Another interesting thing that I can do is I can come in here and where do I need to go? Right here. I can come in here and take a look at previous versions. If I had to, I can restore to a selected version. This is not on a package basis, this is on a project basis. So if I do that, I'll say yes. So this is not a replacement for using Team System or anything like that. It's not meant to be that sort of thing, but it will allow you to very quickly revert to an earlier, kind of like a fail-back plan in case something went wrong. You can easily revert back if you need to. One more way to deploy that I'll show you, there are some other ways, but I'm not going to show you all of them, is by deploying from T-SQL. The cool thing with deploying from T-SQL is that I can also create a folder if I want to on the fly. So in this case, we're going to create a folder called T-SQL Deployment Test. Let me go ahead and grab all of that, cross my fingers, and execute. I didn't get any error messages, so that's good. Refresh, and there's my T-SQL deployment test. So I like this in that it allows me to create the folder on the fly. Maybe there is a way from the other command line to create it on the fly. I didn't find that, but at least with T-SQL you can do that. So those are the ways, or the easy ways, to deploy. So let's see how we would run these packages, actually configure them. So let's talk about, I'm going to delete some of these, get them out of our way. Oh, it won't let me do it because I'm just not going to worry about it. I have to delete all the packages first, so I'm not going to worry about that. Let's just go here. Okay, let's talk about environments. With the environments, this allows you to set up different sets of variables and then map those to the packages. So let me go ahead and create an environment. For example, we might have dev. We might have UAT. We might have prod, or whatever else you would like to do. You know, you can do whatever you want. Once I have these environments created, I can double-click and create a set of variables. So I could do something like st message, give it a type, which is a string, and I could give it a description if I want, and let's just call this hello from dev, and click OK. I can if I want to make this sensitive, but the caveat is that it needs to be something that SSIS would consider sensitive. So basically, it's got to map to password, that type of thing. This is not going to, it's not going to encrypt it because of that fact. So there we go. We got that. Let me go ahead and do a UAT one. Okay, so now I have a couple, I mean, I could create as many as I needed to, server names, passwords, whatever I need to do. So let me go ahead and expand this, and the first thing I'm going to do is click Configure on my project name, and what I can do here is I can go ahead and configure these different parameters. So notice that I don't have anything here from my child package. That's because, remember how I unchecked that entry point on my child package? I could look at it specifically, or I could choose all, but just to be convenient, we can select entry point packages. So probably what you would do here is if you had a master package, you would go ahead and leave that entry point checked. You would leave the entry point checked, and I don't know if you can hear me. I'm getting messages about my audio. You can leave your entry point checked, and then you wouldn't see all those child packages. I could also come in here and configure any connection managers that were not configured with parameters. Hopefully you can hear me again. I'm hearing some weird noises, and I also got some messages that my audio was gone. If I want to connect my project up with any of these environments, I go to the References tab and click Add, and then choose one or more references and click OK. Now I can drill down, and for example, I can, let me go back to that project. Configure. So what I can do here is I could come in here and change the value or set it to this environment variable. So now the package will be configured to use that instead. I kind of find some of this a little tricky in that if I'm running from here and I click execute, I often, even though I've just gone in and set that parameter, it says it still wants a value. So at least from the GUI, most of the time it wants me to come in here and I have to choose the environment down there. And since strdev message was the only string in the DEV environment, it automatically hooked that up. I could also come in here and modify any connection managers, and I could also set any other properties at this point. Now I can either click OK or I can script it to run. I'm going to click Script, and I'm also going to click OK. If I click OK, I get this message telling me about reporting. I'm just going to say no. I don't want to view the report right now. And I can come over here and run this again, and I've got hello from dev. So you can see that I ran the master package, it got its parameter from my dev environment, and it passed that on to the child. Okay, so again, this can get messy. I think you really just need to get with your team, whiteboard out exactly how you're going to do things, and just to make sure that everybody's doing the same thing, that everything is staying consistent. Another way I might want to run my package is from SQL Server Agent. So I can set up a new job. I'm just going to call this test and add my step. And I can choose a integration services package. When I do, this whole thing changes, and now I have choices, either the old method, SQL Server File System, or Package Store, but now I have this new choice, SSIS Catalog. So I still have the old ways to do it, but if I want to do it the new ways, this will work. I can do localhost. I choose the package I would like to run. And on the configurations, again, I can select an environment that I want to use. So maybe on the job, maybe I want the job to have the UAT or the prod or whatever. I can, set my connection managers up or any other properties. So the nice thing is that you get all those same options as if you were running it from the catalog in Management Studio. Okay, let me just cancel out of that. The other way I could, I should say another, not the other, another way I could run this, let's see, do I not have it? I am missing one of my commands. I could also run it from dtexec. The command is slightly different, and I have to apologize because for some reason that code did not end up in my code.sql file. But basically, you've got to use the later version, and you have to give it the path of the IS file, you know, the server where it's located, and the path here, and you can also set up any parameters. So it looks a lot like the old way to use dtexec. And this is the way that you do it with T-SQL. This is the code that it generated for me a couple minutes ago, right before I ran it with the GUI. So what we have is an execution ID. So every time I run the package or any package, I have a specific execution ID, and that's how inside my SSIS DB database it keeps track of that particular execution. So in my so I create this execution, telling it the package, the folder, the project, all of that information, and then in this case, it's also setting my logging level, and if I wanted to, I could have, this is set execution parameter value, I could have multiple statements using that, setting particular parameters if I wanted to. The other thing that it has as far as parameters is this reference ID. To me, that is kind of confusing, because if I look at each of my environments, I'll see an identifier. In my experience, the identifier and the reference ID don't always match up. So basically, let's see, there's a query right here that you can run to see what those references are. And so it's reference ID 1 dev. So what it looks like to me is they don't show up in this list until I set one of the environments up against the project. So right now I only have dev set up. So I found this one kind of confusing, because sometimes I would see a different number when I looked at the properties than this identifier. So evidently it's not the same thing. In this case it is. The other thing that it's doing is setting a parameter for logging level, and we'll take a look at that in just a couple of minutes. Finally, after all these properties are set, we actually start execution along with that execution ID that we created up here. So if I run this, it gives me the execution ID. So if I need to go run some other queries inside the database to see what this is, I have that available. So since I just mentioned logging levels, let's take a look at those. As I mentioned, you get logging by default with this new project level. You do not have to do anything to get the logging. So that is pretty nice. You don't have to worry about where the files are going to go, where you're going to log. It just happens. So if I take a look at, if I right-click on this catalog and go to properties, I will see a number of properties, including, where is it? Okay, yeah, server-wide default logging level. So I can override this at any step of the process. There are 4 levels. None, I guess you can call that a level. It just won't log. Basic, performance, and verbose. Basic is probably what you're going to want to do. Performance only records performance information. It doesn't record other pieces of information that you would like to see, and verbose includes some additional messages. So you're going to get a performance penalty if you choose that one. It's possible. So we're going to leave this one at basic and click OK. So notice that I have this variable set at 1. That's the value for the default logging level. So if I would come in here and let's change it to, so it's 0 through 3. Let's just change it to 3 and run again. And I get a different execution ID. Now if I want to look at what happened, I can right-click and go to Reports, Standard Reports, All Executions, and I'll see information about my packages, and then I can drill down and see what happens. So you can see these numbers right here, 6, 7, and 8. Those should, especially 7 and 8, should look familiar. If I click on, let's look at 6 or 7. That was the one I ran with the default parameter, and you can see I've got a lot of information as well as some times. I can see, I don't see it on here, but there's a place you can see any parameter values, what they were, that type of thing. Let me go back, and I'm going to take a look at the messages from the last time we did it when I changed that logging level, and I should see some additional information. So see these XML, all kinds of messages that I didn't see in the previous example. So there's quite a bit you can get from this. If you don't like what you see there, and you know there's some other things you'd like to have, let's see, logging, go right here. There is out on CodePlex a report pack that you can download and install on reporting services that will allow you to move, for one thing, move their reports out of SQL Server Management Studio, move them to reporting services, and also give you a lot of additional functionality. So I encourage you to go out and take a look at that reporting pack if you decide to go with this model. I have one more thing. I actually had a bonus item I'm not going to get to. I have one more thing, which is what do I do if I have some packages that I want to upgrade? My example is not actually doing the upgrade, but it is going to show you how to go back, how to convert to the newer model. So when you do open a project from an earlier version of SSIS, it will ask you during that project process if you want to convert. So this is this particular project is in the package model, so I have the option to convert to project. So I'm going to go ahead and I do have some connection managers, and I should also have package configuration set up with XML file. So I'm just going to go ahead and right-click and convert to that project model. I'll click Next. There's a list here if you have some you don't want to convert. Not sure how that would work. I would think you have to have them all in the same model. Haven't tried that. Let's see, no execute package, so some information if you have an execute package test, some things you have to be aware of, and the configurations I want to convert, and I can change the scope. So let me go ahead and make this flat file at the project level. So that now I'll get the SQL Server at the package level and the connection manager at the project level. And I can change some other information about these. and go ahead and click Convert. Obviously, if I was doing this in real life, I would take some more time and make sure that all of these questions were answered correctly and close. So now what I have is I have my parameters set up. I no longer can do SSIS configuration files. I don't even have that option anymore. And I'm now in that project deployment model. And if I wanted to, I believe I'd have to get rid of all the parameters before it would let me actually convert back. You can't, yeah. So it'll check it for compatibility, and this will no longer be compatible because I've converted those parameters. There's one other really cool thing with deployment, and I'm just going to show you the slide where I have a couple of blogs about this. This is data taps. Data taps are very similar to the little data viewers, you know, when you're debugging, but data taps send the information out to a file. So I'm not really going to have time to demonstrate this, but I have these two blogs that tell you step by step how to do it. It's pretty cool. So, Melissa, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Are there any questions?
There are. Let's go ahead and take a few. This one says, can you show me how to secure configuration files?
Yeah, so it's no longer files. It is configuration information. And let me think of where we do it. It's one demo I didn't really get for this. So there's when you create your environments, you have this permissions tab. So you can add any of the SQL logins or users to this and say whether they can see it, whether they can read it, modify it, you know, that type of thing. So that's where you set that up. You also, like I said, you can mark variables as sensitive, and then when they are stored, for example, as a password, that type of thing, it'll be encrypted inside the SSIS DB database.
Okay, this question says, do you like to name the environment similar to the solution configurations with VS, within VS?
Oh, so I think what the question is saying, they're talking about this right here, I think. Yeah, you could definitely do that. You could have, you get development by default, you could have UAT, you could have production. You could set that all up here if you wanted, and then you can switch back and forth for testing.
Okay, and this one says, if you need to make changes to just one package in a project, do you need to redeploy the entire project after the change to that one package?
Yes, you have to deploy the entire project, yes.
Okay, and this one says, how do you load a DTSX package that someone else created and that already exists in a catalog so that you may edit it in your own SQL Server data tools?
Okay, so I think, so I'm assuming it's already deployed, and I think you can you export? I'm wondering, yeah, you have to export the entire project, and then you can pull it into Visual Studio that way. So if it's already deployed, you have to export, and then you can export it out to a file and then work with it in a project that way. But it's not on an individual package basis. It's the entire project.
Okay. And this one says, what would be the value of converting from package to project or vice versa?
So the value of converting from package to project would be that now you can use this SSIS catalog. You can take advantage of this new easy way to set up your environment for your configurations. You get that these built-in reports. So it just makes it very easy to manage your SSIS DB. The reason you might want to convert the other way is, let's say your shop is not ready to go with this model yet. You've got everything set up using the old model, you're not ready. So what you would do is, every time you create a new project, by default, it's going to be in the new model. You would have to convert it back to match how you're working in your shop. So it's going to take planning. It's not, you know, something you just haphazardly do to convert to this new model. If you've got a lot of packages in place, you're going to have to spend some time planning. So in the meantime, you'll probably want to use the old model until you're ready to go.
Okay, perfect. Let's see, we have time for just maybe a couple more. This one says, can you deploy from TFS?
From Team Foundation System, so right from like the Source Explorer window, I'm wondering. I think you have to be inside Visual Studio, and you have to be in that, well, you can deploy from command line, I showed you that, but if you're working in Team Foundation, you would see the packages in Source Explorer, whether or not they are checked out. I believe you would not deploy from there. I believe you would have to deploy from the Solution Explorer. So yes, you can have TFS integration, but I believe you'd have to have that project open in Visual Studio. I might be wrong there. I mean, I don't have a ton of team system experience yet, something that I've only started using in the last year. So I'm not sure. I don't think you could.
Okay, and Kathy, do you have a slide that has your information on it for blogging and email?
Right. That slide right there, and I will be posting this deck as well as the answers to all the questions out on AuntKathySQL.com, and I will probably also put it out on my BIDN blog as well.